So I'm bringing you another realistic look at what I eat in a week as someone who is vegan, who tries to eat relatively healthy and budget consciously, but is also a foodie and doesn't like to eat food that sucks. Hopefully this video inspires you and gives you some ideas to circulate some new energy into your recipe rotation. Let's dive in. So this week of Vegan Eats begins on Thanksgiving Day, and this was actually the first Thanksgiving that Eríc and I have spent alone together as a couple. We've always either lived close to one of our families, or last year we had a Friendsgiving, but this turned out to be a really memorable Thanksgiving for us, so I'm happy with how it turned out. We had been super busy the past few weeks filming our vegan turkey taste test and then trying to get a lot of different vegan Thanksgiving recipes up on the blog, and we had been eating so many leftovers from all of those projects. So quite honestly, by the time actual Thanksgiving rolled around, we were both very tired of those traditional foods. So for our Thanksgiving dinner, Eríc decided to make a beef stew to serve over mashed potatoes. And I decided kind of at the last minute to make a pumpkin pie, just so we could have a little bit of something traditional. So I chopped up onion, celery, carrot, mushrooms, garlic for the stew. And I went ahead and peeled and cubed some russet potatoes for the mashed potatoes and covered them with water until later. Then I also went ahead and made my pie crust because I needed that to have time to chill in the fridge before I'd roll it out and actually make the pie. I used the country crock butter for this, and quite honestly, it didn't come out as well as I had hoped. I think Earth Balance has the best texture for pastry, but the flavor isn't my favorite, and I think the country crock butter tastes really good, but it doesn't have the hardness that real butter has that is kind of important for, getting a really nice flaky crust, or if you're trying to make something kind of finicky like croissants. So my little baker's ramble, but that's fine, it wasn't a big deal. The pie was still good. With all of that prep work for the stew out of the way and the pie crust chilling in the fridge, we went out for a little Thanksgiving Day walk. We have lived in Washington State for just under 3 months now, and we've made it a huge priority to go outside on every single sunny day because it really is quite cloudy and moody most of the time during this season. Though I will say, one thing that I've noticed and have really appreciated here is how green it stays in the PNW during the winter. Lots of evergreen trees. Something that I really struggled with living in Colorado was how kind of bleak it becomes during the winter after all the trees die and then, the snow comes in. So being able to, look outside my window even on gloomy mornings and still see that it's super lush and green has been one unexpected blessing since moving here.
Where do you think this goes?
Finding a little time whenever possible to get some sun and be out in nature has been very healing for us. So I don't know, maybe this is your sign to take a little walk or even just step outside and get some fresh air if you're feeling a little overwhelmed or ungrounded. And I'm sending you lots of love.
Look at me.
Back at home, Eríc made us some silly cocktails. They had this holiday cranberry Sprite that he picked up kind of on a whim, and he made Shirley Temples with those. And I don't really drink, so mine had half a shot. But, sometimes it's just nice to make a fun drink for the vibes and the memories. I was also in the process of making my next loaf of sourdough, so I took a moment to go ahead and shape that loaf. This is something I'm still kind of not the best at, but I'm figuring it out, all the shaping. And a little while later, Eríc started to make the beef stew. He very much specializes in recipes like these, big batch, cozy meals like stew, chili, lasagna, pastas. We had picked up a bag of the new Beyond Beef steak. This is our first time trying it, and since groceries have been so expensive lately, we have been relying much less on faux meats. We eat them maybe once a week at most now, and that really made this stew feel like a special occasion treat because it had the vegan beef chunks in there. Eríc braised them in some olive oil with onions, and then in went all the other veggies, and he deglazed the pot with a dry red wine. And again, we rarely drink, and usually if we do, it's either beer for Eríc or a hard seltzer for me. So we didn't have a real corkscrew, so we kind of struggled a bit to open our wine with Eric's Swiss Army knife, but it all worked out. So we had our beef chunks and the veggies simmering in the red wine and vegan beef style broth, and then Eríc tossed in some fresh herbs, sage, rosemary, thyme, and a bay leaf.
and that got to simmer for about an hour. It smelled incredible, and then at the end we thickened it with a little cornstarch slurry and added in some frozen peas. And instead of putting potatoes in the stew, we served the stew over garlic mashed potatoes. We started out by sauteing lots of fresh minced garlic in vegan butter, and then we whisked together some chicken style vegetable broth along with a few big scoops of the vegan sour cream from Trader Joe's, and we used our potato ricer. Honestly, it's a game changer. It really lets you get the potatoes super smooth without over mixing them and developing the starch and making them gloopy. We added fresh chives, and I genuinely think these were like the best mashed potatoes either of us has made since we've been vegan. We were just so happy with how our Thanksgiving dinner came out. It was like one of our favorite meals in recent memory. We want to put both of the recipes up on the blog, and we will as soon as we test the beef stew one more time with soy curls. We did enjoy the Beyond Beef chunks, but we're not sure that they're the perfect protein for this recipe, but I promise we'll add it to the blog once we perfect it.
We're going to take a quick pause to give a big shout out to the sponsor of today's video, LMNT.
LMNT is an electrolyte drink mix that has everything you need and nothing you don't. So that means there's a lot of salt and no sugar.
LMNT is formulated to benefit anyone and everyone with their electrolyte needs. Whether you're recovering from a workout or a night out, LMNT has your back.
Their drink mixes contain a science-backed ratio of potassium, magnesium, and of course sodium. What they don't have is filler. That means no sugar, food coloring, or artificial ingredients.
LMNT can be helpful for anyone, so I'm someone who is chronically forgetting to drink enough water. I get dehydrated, I get headaches. LMNT helps me to stay hydrated and to actually look forward to getting my hydration.
And I love drinking LMNT after a long, hard workout on the bike. It just helps me recover so much faster than just like chugging a bottle of water.
The best part is that LMNT comes in a bunch of delicious flavors. They don't taste artificial. You can definitely tell they're made with real, pure ingredients.
If you want to try out LMNT for yourself, head on over to drinklmnt.com/SVK for a free sample pack with your order. That's 8 single serving packets, one of each flavor for free.
This deal is only available through our link, so head over there, try it out, and don't forget to stay salty.
It's really good.
Back to our Thanksgiving, I also made a vegan pumpkin pie. In the past, I had tried some vegan pumpkin pie recipes that were mostly thickened with starch, and I just kind of felt that they lacked that custardy texture I remember from regular pumpkin pie. So this year I wanted to try to follow a more classic recipe and see if I could just substitute in Just Egg and some vegan condensed coconut milk. Now, I had tried to use Just Egg to make brownies before, and it was a complete disaster. They never set, so I was like 80% prepared for this to also be a total disaster. I did add in a few tablespoons of cornstarch just for some extra insurance that it would set. It was still very wet and jiggly at the end of the recommended bake time, but I trusted the process. I let it cool completely, then I refrigerated it for several hours, and it did end up setting up really nicely. I was able to get nice clean slices. I also wanted to try to make vegan whipped cream without using coconut milk, so I used a recipe from School Night Vegan. You essentially make your own heavy whipping cream substitute by emulsifying regular soy milk with melted refined coconut oil. Then you chill that completely, and it beats up with powdered sugar to stiff peaks, almost exactly like regular whipping cream. I think I actually took it a tad too far. So if you try this out, once you get those stiff peaks, don't overmix it. It kind of turns into like a Play-Doh consistency if you do. I think I'm still more of a fan of the typical whipped coconut cream, but this is a great option to have if you don't like the flavor of coconut. Just make sure to use the refined deodorized coconut oil, and this stuff kind of tastes like vanilla marshmallows. The following morning, I baked my sourdough loaf first thing. I had it cold fermenting in the fridge overnight. I think a lot of people get intimidated by the length of the sourdough making process, and I was too, especially as someone who is like not the best at planning and sequencing things. But honestly, I think it's a very flexible process because you can always just pop your dough in the fridge at whatever stage it's at to slow down the process and kind of make it work for your schedule. This vegan salmon spread from Trader Joe's is something I would have never reached for on my own, but I saw a lot of people raving about it on social media, so I picked it up and we turned out to really like it. It's kind of weird, really smoky, really savory, but I'd say worth a try if you used to like smoked salmon. Okay, so right now cabbage and kale are like my vegetable hyperfixations. I could eat them like every single meal. I think the best way to start eating healthier isn't necessarily to do like a 180 and eliminate all the things that aren't good for you. Instead, I would say find 1 or 2 ingredients that are healthy. that actually make you feel good, and just try to find more and more ways to eat those. So then you can kind of reframe healthy eating as making positive additions rather than subtracting or depriving yourself of other things. So I made a big batch of this kale crunch salad, which is curly kale massaged with a maple Dijon vinaigrette, then tossed with cabbage and toasted nuts. It's so good. It's sweet and savory. The crunch is super satisfying, and we served that with leftover broccoli cheddar soup, and Eríc made a few slices of garlic parmesan bread with our fresh sourdough loaf. Speaking of broccoli cheddar soup, I had made a big batch of that a few days prior. I find myself making a big pot of soup at least once a week during the fall and winter, and that gives us an option for a really quick and easy lunch or dinner. I make this particular soup all the time. I think I like it so much because it reminds me a lot of clam chowder, which used to be like my favorite soup ever before going vegan. This has that same thick and creamy texture, and the key to achieving that is to cook the potatoes in the broth, and then once they're tender, you scoop about half of them out of the soup and you blend them with some soaked raw cashews. They take on a super velvety texture, and then when you mix that back into the soup, it thickens and it's just amazing. I add in carrots and broccoli florets to cook in the broth before I add the blended potatoes and cashews back into the mix, and it gets a savory, cheesy flavor from a combination of spices, and usually I add a lot of nutritional yeast. I actually ran out of it this time, so I didn't get to add as much as I usually do, but even without it, the soup tastes really good. It's super hearty and satisfying. I love leaving some of the potato chunks intact. Soup in general is just one of my favorite ways to get in lots of veggies and really nourish myself. You can check this recipe out on my blog. I will have it linked down below. I'd love to know what you think. We had a bunch of food scraps from that week, and we ran those through Our Lomi. This is like a little composting machine that we use since we don't have a backyard where we can maintain our own compost pile. Eríc is obsessed with this thing. It basically turns all your food scraps into dirt. It's very satisfying. The next morning I woke up feeling kind of under the weather and stuffy, and I had a headache, so I decided to make a little pot of chicken noodle soup. I filmed this vertically so I could share it as a reel and as a YouTube short, so I'll link it down below if you want to check that out for more details. But it was very cozy, definitely hit the spot, and we had some of the extra noodles that I didn't put in the soup just with butter and vegan parm. I did a lot of resting that day, and then for dinner, Eríc made me breakfast for dinner, which is kind of like a random craving I was having. So he made a tofu and just egg scramble, some Beyond Breakfast sausages, and then some pancakes. The following day, I was feeling much better, and Eríc and I wanted to retest our vegan fettuccine Alfredo recipe so we could finally get it up on the blog. And the recipe is live now if you want to try it out. I'll link it down below. And we weren't trying to make this, like a healthy vegan version of Alfredo or anything. We really just wanted a classic Alfredo sauce made with vegan ingredients. So we used plenty of vegan butter, homemade cashew cream instead of heavy cream, follow your heart non-dairy Parmesan, lots of garlic. I had some leftover roasted garlic from the soup I'd made the day before, so we threw some of that in too. We do like to add finely diced either onions or shallots to ours, which isn't traditional, but we think it just adds a little something extra to the dish. And the key to get this vegan Alfredo sauce nice and creamy and coating the noodles is to reserve lots of the starchy pasta water and just be generous with that to get that velvety texture. And this tip is something I used to hear all the time, and I would add like the tiniest splash of pasta water, but really you can add a lot. Like we added maybe a cup here. You just drain your pasta when it's very al dente, and then we allow it to finish cooking in the sauce. And that pasta water, in addition to thickening up the sauce so it really coats the noodles, also helps to emulsify it, especially if it's a sauce that has a lot of fat in it from olive oil or butter. It's gonna make it so the sauce has that luscious mouthfeel without feeling greasy. So a lot of times, since we like to film and photograph with natural light and the sun sets so early these days, we will make our dinner like hours before we actually plan to eat it, and that was the case with this Alfredo. So several hours later, I came back and I roasted up some Brussels sprouts and carrots to serve with the pasta for dinner. I've always been very on the fence about cooked carrots, especially if I think they're overcooked and mushy, but we started roasting them recently and they are amazing, like highly underrated in my opinion. And I was listening to a good podcast. I wanted to keep hanging out in the kitchen, so I thought I would go ahead and prep this pomegranate for Eríc. These were on clearance for $1 a piece the other day. Eríc loves pomegranates, so he grabbed them. And I know there are like all sorts of tricks for preparing pomegranates, like you can whack them with a spoon, but I don't know. I don't really mind getting a little messy. I'm very obsessed with the color of pomegranate. I also made myself a little Hōjicha latte. This is a roasted green tea powder. I'd actually never tried it before, but one of my few Black Friday purchases was a restock of matcha while it was on sale. And while I was ordering, I thought I'd try some of this too, and I really like it. It has a nice, sweet, roasted flavor. It's not as strong or kind of vegetal tasting as matcha in my opinion. And my favorite milk combo for lattes lately has been half soy and half oat milk. It gives me really nice froth. By then our roasted veggies were done. By the way, these were just tossed with olive oil, maple syrup, and balsamic. And we had those with our leftover Alfredo from earlier. Watched a little TV, had dinner. And then later on, I made a batch of vegan chocolate chip mini muffins. A few weeks ago, we went to Grocery Outlet for the first time since moving here. And if you're not familiar with that chain of grocery stores, they basically have like dramatically discounted products, and they have a lot of vegan things that I think are inventory from different stores that are kind of close to expiring. So you can get them super cheap at Grocery Outlet. It's a good place to check for vegan cheeses and meats and stuff. But we had bought some of those Abe's vegan chocolate chip muffins, and Eríc got super excited to eat those with his coffee every morning. And we were really sad when we ran out, so I made some. I used the mini chips from Enjoy Life, and can I just say, chocolate chips are so expensive now. This bag was like $6 or something crazy. But I only used like 3/4 a cup for this recipe. And I'm gonna resist the urge to go on an extended rant about this right now, but I just have to say, it's so upsetting that the cost of food has increased so much when we all know grocery stores regularly throw away tons of perfectly good food just because it isn't purchased. And I've worked in restaurants and cafes, and I've seen firsthand how much perfectly good food gets thrown into a dumpster at the end of every night. So that's just disappointing. I'll leave it at that. So the next few clips are going to be kind of like random meals that we whipped up either without a recipe or just leftovers. We really love eating just egg for breakfast, but we have been inspired lately by Lisa from Viet Vegan to mix it with tofu in our scrambles to kind of just stretch the product a little further since it can be a little pricey. So we love to eat this for breakfast with either rice or toast and chili crisp. We also had a lot of leftover beef stew and mashed potatoes and kale crunch salad over the course of the week. Eríc usually also makes fried rice at least once or twice a week because we always have cold leftover rice in the fridge, and he'll just throw in like tofu and whatever other veggies we have extras of. This night we ate some of that with the leftover roasted garlic chicken noodle soup, and I also made another batch of that kale crunch salad with Tuscan kale instead of curly kale this time. And then this is a Korean-inspired spicy tofu stew I made kind of on a whim. Back when Eríc and I were living in San Diego, end of 2020, early 2021, we were eating a lot of Korean foods because we had access to all these amazing Asian markets in California, and we were also really obsessed with K-dramas and just kind of wanting to explore Korean cooking more. And sometimes when I want to feel more connected to a specific time in my life and I'm feeling nostalgic, I like to make something with those flavors again, and it brings me back. And that's one of the most powerful things that I think food can do. So I sauteed onion, garlic, zucchini, shiitake mushrooms, and some sesame oil. And I added water and some yondu umami sauce, along with some vegan mushroom oyster sauce and soy sauce, and then some gochugaru, which are Korean red pepper flakes. We had some glass noodles in our pantry, and that sounded really good, so I cooked those up. And typically I use silken tofu for this. It's a more satisfying texture, but we just had some soft tofu, so I just broke that up in there. All in all, not the prettiest thing I've ever made, but it was really delicious and comforting. And we recently started a new K-drama, Business Proposal. I've really been craving something kind of lighthearted. We've been watching This Is Us, which is an amazing television series, but it's also kind of heavy, and I just wanted something lighter to balance it out.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. These are very long, and I appreciate you if you made it to the end. Wherever applicable, I will have the recipes linked in the description box. Check them out. Let me know how they come out for you if you try any of them. And I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye.